Okay. Okay, all right. I'm just waiting for the Twitch to synchronize. Yeah, here we are. All right, seems like things are online. So, good day, everyone. Hello, hello. Nice to be here again. And today I hope you all of you guys had good Halloween Halloween weekend, some fun activities. Uh, I didn't do anything spectacular, didn't go anywhere, but I watched one good movie that I can recommend. It's called Coco by a Pixar animation, which is great for the whole family. And for tonight's stream or today's stream, I have Mikhail the 16th. So quite an impressive miniature. He's the henchman for Yenza. And for reference, I will be using the box art, which is absolutely lovely. And fun thing, this is the mirror image of the actual miniature. So looking at the artwork, what I want to do is I want to have those cool colors going on his cloak, on his pants, maybe dark blue, maybe some grayish blue for the cloak, then some warm browns for the leather armor. And it seems like his face in the artwork is slightly yellowish, like it's been exposed to sun, all that, seeking and wandering can do things to your skin. So looks like a weary traveler. So that's the kind of look that I will be going for. And there are plenty of those tiny, really tiny details, like the ornaments on his beard, like some small crystal-like things on his beard. And then there is the sword, the huge, majestic sword that he's wielding. It's amazing. Oh yeah, Coco, MacBlood, thanks for noting that. That's a really, really impressive movie. And there is this amazing creature that reminds me of Perdita Avatar miniature, this huge tiger with wings. Such a visual feast this movie is. But before I jump into painting Mikhail, okay, one thing to note, his base is, the position that he's in, it's quite tough to fit him onto the standard 30mm base. So I did some sculpting on the base and use some random bits to fill it in with some old watch parts, like this steampunk wasteland. That's the look I'm going for here. And I sculpted it in a way just to add a bit more dynamism to the pose. It's a great pose already, but I thought that by giving him this extra height, he will look even more dynamic. And maybe before I jump, let me just quickly go through the stuff that I've painted for the Seeker keyword so far. So I started, a couple of weeks ago, I painted Yenza, so the Seeker Master. Okay, here is the, let's see if it can, yeah, here's the focus. So this is the first miniature that I started with, and I think I might go for slightly similar shade of blue on the cloak on the coat for Mikhail. Then I painted the grave goo. That, well, quite an unusual miniature. And over the last week, since my kids were on quarantine due to the fact that the teacher got sick with COVID, unfortunately, but nothing wrong happening there, just precautionary measures. So I was with kids at home, and that meant that I could have early night painting every day. So I painted Ulster and Twiggy. I also painted the Damned. That's the second Damned I've painted. And then, as you can see, the basing style is similar. And I also painted Sophie, so Totem for Yenza, which is this huge, huge bovine skeleton. Let's see if it gets focused. Yeah, so that's the, oh, well. Oh, there is the focus, perfect. And this is also a really impressive miniature. And you try to kind of imagine the sound that follows Yenza and her crew when they walk, and you hear all those bells jingling. And fun fact, here is a little tiny treasure map that was actually suggested by my fellow Wyrd streamer Ben. I asked the community for some suggestions on what to do here, and I really liked Ben's suggestion with treasure map, so I made this simple drawing of treasure, which is also name of one of the upgrades that you can use for the secret, well, for the Explorer Society. So that's the Seeker progress so far. And now on to the Mikhail. So there are two ways of tackling such complex miniatures. And one way would be to going inside out, the other outside in. And by going inside out, outside in, I'm referring to the order in which I paint the miniature. So I'm thinking I will start with, first of all, defining the details. Then I will paint the interior part of his clothing. Then I will do the big cloak, the coat that he has. Or maybe before that I will do the scarf and the face. There is just so much going on that it will be literally a journey dealing with this miniature. And for the final stage, I will do the base. And also one thing, so I will just give it a quick overbrush with off-white, which is something that I've been doing consistently for the streams, just to begin with. And something that was also pointed to me, and I'm grateful for this input. In one of the comments to the previous stream, there was a comment about the quality, that it's not always that good. So I'm using bigger white background today, and I will make sure to pause every now and then and slow down, because in my previous two streams I was working on 3 miniatures, the new Nexus models, 3 models simultaneously, and I think that just moving them back and forth, shifting them all the time, the focus was not always there. So I will do my best to keep the focus, to make sure that you guys can follow all the brush strokes that I put here. And I'm also making an effort to declutter the workspace, because I thought that this could also affect the stream when there are too many items, because the camera just keeps on losing focus, and this is just how it works. It just doesn't know which the focal point is. So starting with this white overbrush, and I'm just, as you can see, the brush still leaves some trace of paint, and I will be going over basically the whole miniature. It's not pure white, because pure white creates a bit of too extreme contrast, which is too early for making that. I don't want to, because with too much contrast, even when I apply contrast paint afterwards, it just doesn't look good. There was a good comment made by one of my favorite painters, Angel Giraldes, in one of his last painting videos, by the way, check out this guy's social media. He's currently working on the new big Sonya, and he's showing some work in progress shots. This new collection edition, this huge Sonya Creed miniature, worth checking out. And the sword, the blade of the sword actually has some texture on it, which is really interesting because you don't want to cover it with thick paint, because if you cover it with very thick paint, if you go too heavy on it, you just cover all the details. And I want to make sure to be able to get to the details later on. And the blade also is in the artwork, it's metallic, silver metallic in the middle and slightly golden on the sides. So it doesn't look like a very common sword. Quite unusual blade. So we'll have some fun with it. But what strikes me about this miniature is how well the material and all the clothing on the model is 3D sculpted. That's how it starts, right? It gets 3D sculpted, then it gets printed. But what I mean by how well, if you just look at how the robes add some kind of ferocity, it's like there is this highly the pose that he has, it's like full of expectation. Things are about to go down, and he is very much ready for whatever happens next. Okay, so that's almost done with the overbrushing part. Maybe a bit more on the base, just in case, and I may be able to finish the whole miniature tonight. I'm not going to push it too heavily. It's not about speed painting, it's about making sure I find the right balance between speed and quality. And while streams are by definition, by default, I would say they will never be as high quality as individually recorded tutorials where you have time to zoom in on everything, have perfect lighting. There is unavoidable slight loss of quality when it's live, but I hope that if I make these tweaks from my end, this will be a bit easier for you guys to follow. So that's the setup for the work. And I will start by maybe picking up those tiny details. So why not start with those crystals? I will be going inside out. So starting with Aethermatic blue, that's the color I'll be going with first. It doesn't have very strong pigment. It's quite useful using this object source lighting because it's not that heavy. And I will pick up I will be careful with the quantity of paint that I apply with the brush, and I will just pick up the tiny bluish crystals on his beard and the ornaments that he has, remembering that what I'm working on is the mirror image of the artwork on the box art. So there is one here and one in the beard, which is, no, it's not. On the pommel of his sword, there are those crystal-like formations. This is something that I can always modify when I make more progress with the model. So clearly defining the edges around those, going even a bit more than necessary because the rest of this part of the blade will be much darker, so there will be contrast anyway. There is that. And there is the, that's the start. And now looking at the artwork, I'm hesitating whether I should go with the robes or with the cloak. I think I will actually start with, why not the face? And then his hair is quite bright. So once I have the skin part covered, the hair and the hands, or at least those sections of hand, those parts of hands that are visible, it will give me a good idea of how I want to balance this bright spot, because his face will have this warm shade. And as you can see, the features, the facial features are so well defined. He looks like this ancient warrior. There is actually a good story about Mikhail. It's not a separate story, just story behind this character. And let me just grab the color that I want. I think I will use the Gallimon Flesh. Let me just get it. The story is that, well, a long time ago, because it seems that anything that Yenza did happened a long time ago. Okay, there is the Gallimon Flesh. So she saved the family. And there isn't a clarity on what was actually going on, but she did a huge favor by saving some family members, and as a token of their appreciation, they swore loyalty and have been steadily providing their help to Yenza by making sure that they provide a new Mikhail for her. So Mikhail the 16th, when I first saw the name, I thought wow, it must be some kind of royal title like King Mikhail the 16th, but it's actually the 16th Mikhail in line. So the 16th, either generation or 16th man from the family who was chosen or who volunteered to help Yenza. And he is featured in Yenza's story in the Explorer's book. And he's just this super calm presence, doesn't seem to be affected by traveling, by hardships of being on the move all the time. He just calmly follows Yenza, accepting that he's just doing his job that he has to do for this mysterious lady, and he doesn't really question what she's doing. He doesn't inquire about the motivations. He just follows her around. He's the protector, the fighter, just getting his job done. And I will, as I said before, I will make sure that there will be a slightly warmer shade to the skin tone. So I'll be adding some yellow to it for the highlights. But for now, I will just use pure skin shade, which is slightly pinkish. It's a neat story. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's I would say if you compare it to Jackdaw or Seamus or Rasputina or other big arcs of big narratives in Malifaux. It's rather heartwarming. Of course, there's this mystery. There is this part where they meet Zoraida and some bad things happen in the swamp, but overall it has a rather positive vibe to it. Let me just dive for my yellow glaze. That's the yellow glaze I wanted. And then there's Bass and Bernadette. And Bernadette just asks Yenza directly, "Are you a necromancer, lady?" She just shrugs it off and they just keep on going. She has all the time in the world to do what she's got to do. So now I've mixed on the palette. This is this spot here. I'm going for this yellowish skin tone, yellowish brownish, so it's a mix of basic skin tone with some with a drop of Galliman flesh and a drop of yellow glaze. I'll just grab a smaller brush, and there's something that has to be said about the consistency. What does it mean to have this milk-like consistency? I think Big Dano Paints, he made a good comment about it, that there is no such thing as the right consistency. It depends on what you are after. And here I have this consistency. Maybe if I show it on the fingernail, how it works. So as you can should be able to see, it basically tints the fingernail. It doesn't really change the color. It's a tint. So this is the consistency I'm going for. Whether it's consistency of dirty water or milk can be debatable. But the reason I want this thin consistency is that once I start applying the highlights, I will very slowly and very gently, making sure there isn't too much of it on the brush. I will just very gently go over the skin, trying to leave some of the base coat showing, so some of the base color. And the benefit of using thin consistency for highlights is that you can wait for it to dry or speed it up with hair dryer if you have one handy. And once it's dry, you can just go ahead and apply the same color with the same consistency, just focusing on slightly smaller surface. And if you do it a few times, you get this really smooth transition, and you don't need dozens of paints. You literally need base coat, brighter paint, mix it together, thin it down, apply a couple of layers, successive layers, making sure each one covers smaller surface, and you're good to go. The main challenge with this approach is that you need to be very patient, and ideally you should have a pretty good control of the brush to make sure you don't overflow the details and you don't work over the same areas. So now the paint is kind of dry. I'm going over the face again, but this time I'm trying to focus on smaller surface because his forehead is clearly defined. There is this naturally formed crevice of the skull going in here. So if I make an effort to cover gradually smaller surface, then it will automatically create this smooth transition. And guys, those of you following the stream, just holler at me if my finger gets in the way or if you don't see clearly what I'm doing. As I said at the beginning, I'm just doing my best to make the most out of the video setup I have. It's not a perfect setup, but this kind of feedback that you give either during the stream or in the comments afterwards, it helps with making sure the quality gets better and better. So I will add a little bit of off-white to the mix, and I will start building up the brighter shade. And again, this time I will try to draw a few lines just to go with the idea that Mikhail is frowning, maybe in contempt, though he isn't really presented as this kind of emotional character. He just accepted his role, that he's this family sacrifice to Yenza calls, and he just hangs around, gets up, and moves on when he's needed to move on, doesn't question the motivations of Yenza, just follows her. And the same goes for the knuckles. And now I'm not going over the whole finger, rather focusing on just the knuckle bones. Just the knuckles and the tips of fingers. Actually, I'll be damned. I think even his fingernails are there. This is impressive. You just don't see all the details in the 3D renders on the boxes until you've base coated the model. I didn't even appreciate the quality of the sculpt until I've done an overbrush to pick up the details. And I'm thinking now, looking at the blade, maybe I will try some metallics with color shift from the color shift range. So the kind of colors that you see on cars when light hits them. And you see that it's not just plain metallic blue or metallic green, that it changes color depending on how light hits it. I reckon one more highlight or two more quick highlights just to get the skin, just to work on those highlights a little bit more. And what I'm doing here is just, I have my basic mix and I have white next to it, my off-white color, and I keep on adding a little bit to my base color so that I see how it transitions from this through that to the highlight that I have. So this is much brighter than the first layer of paint, so the highlights become more pronounced at this stage. And I'm being very selective with that area that I'm touching with the tip of the brush. And it's typically a good idea to look at the miniature from different angle and see that the highlights are not only placed to be visible from one specific direction, rather than it's a fully three-dimensional piece. And now that I might just go with one final very, very light touch of this off-white shade just on the tip of the nose. Pick a spot on the most protruding elements, just one in the middle, to make sure there is a bit of additional visibility for the most pronounced highlights. And that will be followed with a light thin down flesh wash. So I will add a bit of lime and medium to make sure that it doesn't ruin the highlights I built up at this stage. And I will also add a touch of yellow glaze, Lamentus yellow, to the shade that I will be applying on the skin tone. Don't want to go too much too heavy with that. And again, I will test it on the sheet of paper. It barely leaves a trace, which is essentially what I'm after. And I will try to make sure that you guys can see how it affects the highlights I've built at this point. Basically, it's like filtering. When you think of graphics editors, or Instagram for that matter, when you use different filters, it's as if you were looking at the same thing through different type of lens. So this is roughly what I'm doing here. And seems fine. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it. I'm trying to approach it a bit differently. Just adding this yellowish shade to that. It's maybe about, well, I'm not sure there is any background on Mikhail's ethnicity, but I'm trying to find a color which would be suitable for a person who spends like most of his life outdoors. So now taking a big breath and bracing myself to paint the eyes, which will be the next thing. And he has this facial expression as if he was frowning, and in practice it means that his eyes are barely visible there. So what I will do is I will grab snakebite leather and with a tiny brush I will prepare the area where the eyes will be. So I'll just mark it and this will serve as a sort of guidance for me. And the reason I turned it upside down, I think it's because I'm right-handed, and in order to paint the left eye I'm just not able to find a good angle with holding the miniature up front. So there is one eye socket prepared to be tackled, and the second one will be there. Will be ready in a moment. This is the part which is probably the most time consuming, so I don't want to rush it. I want to be very precise. He will look as if he had dark circles around his eyes, which I think is suitable given the menacing pose he has, the kind of frown-like expression. I will just clear up some of the details on the nose because there is this darker spot I not like. Okay. And while it dries, I think I will prepare the hair, the facial hair. It looks like the facial hair, the eyebrows. In the artwork, at least, it's all the same color. So I will start with Wraithbone, which will be the base coat. So I will just clean up the area where the skin tone got onto the hair, because I used Wraithbone in spray to begin with, which is a bit different, which is a bit brighter than Wraithbone from the bottle. He's like this Mongol warrior, now that I think of it a bit more. And I think I might have missed part of what should be his skin here. So I will go with the Gallimon flesh while I still have the mix on the palette and just add a dab of it here, and I'm perfectly fine with it being a bit darker because this is a shaded area. Hello, Octabit. Nice to see people dropping by. Feels like Monday to me because it's the first working day of the week in Poland, because Monday was All Saints Day, which is bank holiday in Poland. So it seems as if feels like I'm a bit out of context, because my mind screams that it should be Monday, not Tuesday. All right. And bringing out the hair detail again, making sure it's fully visible. How's it going? It's going rather well. It always feels a bit like a cold shower when you have to catch up with work after being off, when other people you work with are in different countries, different time zones. And I'm not telling about the stream here, it's just my daily work. It's typically with people from oftentimes with different time zones and with different countries where they don't have day off when I have day off. So it's sometimes a bit challenging, but things are under control. So the eyebrows, the bushy eyebrows he has, they add to this menacing look he has. And actually, I had a chat with Kimberly, who mentioned a character from Dune that would work well as a reference point for painting Mikhail, played by Jason Momoa. I believe it's the name of the actor. So those of you who watched the latest version of Dune are probably familiar with the character. I'm not. I haven't watched it. One part Gallium flesh, one part Magus purple, plus one part contrast medium is my go-to for pale one mutant flesh. Yeah, it seems like it could work. Do you then pick up the details or just leave it at this stage? Because I think if you use it on bright base coat, it should look good enough really at this point. So just wondering if this is the recipe that you then work with afterwards, or you just leave it there because the effect is good enough for what you want. Hey Sival, thank you. Glad you like it. So now the tricky part comes, the eyes. So the sniper work. You hit them or you don't. So while I've painted probably hundreds of pairs of eyes, there's always this element of risk that things may go wrong. So I tend to keep a just in case brush with water, not paint, in case I need to quickly remove the paint and do the eyes again. So let's see how it goes. So one eye. I think a bit too much of paint that I have on the brush. Making sure that the tip of the brush is solid. Not perfectly happy with what I have, but still not over. Okay, that's more like it. And now upside down again for the left eye, because I'm incapable of painting the left eye, holding them in a standard way. Yeah, that's more like it. And the reason I put those darker spots there is just to give this kind of frame for the pupils. And this is one really evil looking Mikhail. Wouldn't that be cool just to leave him like that at this stage? This is the kind of Evil Dead, right? The zombie movies from the 90s, I think. There was this trend to have the eyes popping up of the eyes of demons and zombies popping up like that. But that's a human, so Line Troopers, no. For characters, pay flash highlights. Yeah, I think it's if you have a good recipe that works for you to have the base code and you feel comfortable using it, then doing the characters using this setup can be highly effective. So again, being mindful not to keep the workspace cluttered. And let's go for the eyes now. Shooting lightning out of his eye. Yeah, could be. The looks that could kill. Now, Black Templar, and I'm not using black paint because black paint has this much thicker consistency, and I feel like I should be able to have a bit more control with Black Templar. All right, getting into focus, and here we go. Let's see. If you get the eyes wrong, you end up with this character who looks like he's having a really bad time. So I like to start with a very, very thin line that is somewhere in the middle. Make sure that the tip of brush is solid. And I can start working with the middle area. Because if I have the black spot, which is well placed in the middle, I can always try to work on the white areas around it. Not sure if I'm perfectly happy with what I have, but let's see how the other eyes goes. So now the right eye, and you want to make sure you're aiming for the middle. Okay, I have the dot there, and now a bit more work there. Not perfectly happy with the right eye. It still requires a bit of work. You want to have both eyes looking in the same general direction. Okay, getting closer there. This is really the trickiest part. Oh no, spam alert in the chat. Okay, now I will grab some white, work on framing the pupils. And even if I get them perfectly where I want them to be, I'm still not sure that the quality will be good enough for you guys to see it. Because now you can just work around the black spot in the middle. If you just dab the brush very lightly, you can kind of put a frame there to the pupil. And I'm sorry if I'm holding it in not the most convenient way for you guys following. It's just not easy to find the right angle, and it's all about finding the right angle to make sure that he doesn't look like he's cross-eyed. All right, let's see if I can get it visible for you guys. Okay, so one more thing that I will do for the eyes, maybe one more small correction here. Yeah, seems almost perfect. Just a quick retouch. Twirling to get the perfect tip. And really doing this sniper quality type of effort here. Okay, I got the better frame with white, but I still need to do one more retouch with black. And then I will be happy with the eyes. And then I will do just one more thing before I move to the eyebrows. Yeah, that's reasonably good. And now for the final part that I want to do here is I will grab a wash, soft tone, water it down because I want to avoid this highly contrastive white on the eyes because it gives this Evil Dead type of look, which could be fine for some models, not perfect for others. And as you can see, I've just flooded it with glaze, and I will spread it now evenly because this just adds a layer of color that will kind of filter it. Now for the hair, I will go with leather brown as the base coat. And again, I will consult the artwork. So it is quite time consuming. But then once you get through with the face, everything else seems a bit easier. So there are some decorations in his beard, and I will pick them out later on. For now, I just want a solid basic color. So have any of you guys following the stream had the pleasure of playing Yenza Crew or the questionable pleasure of facing her? Because what I have never played against Yenza. I have never seen her. I've seen her on the table at one tournament, but I've never faced her. But from what I hear, what I read, Mikhail can be the star pick model who can just soak up a lot of damage, get healed up. He's hard to kill. He has armor. He's a henchman. He can reduce the damage. And he can be like a sponge for damage, forcing the opponent to just put a lot of effort into taking him down. And while the effort is there, the rest of the crew does the scheming. Is it the idea? You get to pierce that bubble. So, the doppelganger, did you lure out the key pieces out of the bubble and then dealt with them separately? Was it the approach that you've used? Because it seems like it could be a valid strategy. Now the eyebrows. I will try to keep them maybe a bit brighter than the rest, or I will see. And then the facial hair as well. So making sure that the paint is thinned down, and the reason why it's thinned down here is because I don't want to completely obscure the highlights I've built on the skin. And by having it slightly thinned down, I can make sure it looks like it's actual facial hair. I lured out the dumbest, slowest things, honestly. I think with the windy gun, Mikhail was not going well, so I considered Grave Goo and the cow force going against them. There you go. If you want to beat Yenta, take care of Sophie and the goo. Sophie is this. I think she hands those life tokens to Yenta, and then she can just bring models back from that, which seems almost unfair because you put so much effort into taking them down, and they are just back. And just we'll use Emperor's Children just to pick up the lips. So lure, that's good to remember. There are a couple of options, and I play Neverborn, so there are a few models that have a reliable lure, including one of the standard go-to models for most of Neverborn crews, which never seems like a bad choice. The Hinamatsu. Such a toolbox. It's a model that can do. That seems like the right play. Oh, you still didn't win. You still didn't win, but at least you know how to approach it next time. What are the linchpin models? I think that if I was to play Jens, I would consider using Euripides because he forces so many walk duels, and it seems just by glancing at the cards of the Seeker keyword, like generally they have lower walk. Like Mikhail has just walk of 4, which isn't much. So now I will use soft light tone. Maybe before I use light tone, I will just lightly dry brush the hair to just pick up the individual hair strands. And for that, I will use bone white. And again, being very careful not to keep the clutter on the desk so that the camera can get good focus. So a bit of dry brush just to pick up the individual strands of hair. because then when I use of wash, it will just naturally tint the overbrushed areas, leaving strengthening the shade. And then I will grab a small thin brush and pick them up individually. Now, field shake. And I will, before I apply it, I will just check if that's what I want. Well, that's not perfect. Maybe I will just use the soft tone instead. Thin it down with water a little bit. And then when I zoom it in, you will see how it affects the hair color. Or maybe the consistency is a bit too thin. I think I might just go with it straight from the pot once I've made sure that I shake it before use. And here I will need to be very careful not to get it on the skin, making sure that there is a small thin line separating the hairline from the face. And it's already getting a more 3D look. This is the expression I tend to use when the miniature is starting to look like a character. And I often tend to start with these parts that are most time consuming, because getting them right is highly impactful and kind of sets you up for the rest of the painting journey. Some people do the faces at the end. Painting her has always been a point. Yeah, well, it's a different type. You can think of different sections of models as different types of canvas. And her, I think what tends to happen sometimes, what I see is that people just dry brush it, which is fine, pick up the details, and that's it. But if you go put a bit more effort into adding glazes, like purple glaze to black hair, small things that add a lot. So here I started with, it's called Leather Brown from Reaper, which is this not too bright brown. I dry brushed over it with very light color, and now I'm at the stage where I'm giving it all a glaze of rather soft brown, and I'm already somewhere up ahead. I will add one more touch of yellow mixed with light brown to the face. And just to kind of frame the eyebrows a bit more, I will use a strong tone, or maybe a mid-brown. Because it's a bit darker shade, and then you can go from bright to dark, and then pick up the highlights. making sure there isn't too much, and pick up the area around the eyebrows. And then darken some sections of the beard, maybe a little bit close to this side. One thing that I've mentioned already, that while working with glazes, contrasts, washes, well, you name it, one very important thing that I keep on repeating is to make sure you don't allow the paint to pool in one place, because this would there is this risk of creating a dark pool that you won't be able to remove. Yeah, I will just need to wait for it to dry to pick up the individual strands of hair. But let me pause for a second. Looks really glossy at this point. But now it looks pale against my hand. But the evil, angry eyes are there. So while it dries, I might as well start on working on the scarf. But I think the scarf, I'm thinking I might put it in either red or orange, just to give a bit more of a frame to the head. So I will start with orange, which is this nice griff hunt shade, griff hunt orange. It has this old look, like this old scarf around his neck, just to sort of frame the head a bit more. It's another color that would be a bit warmer, and then the colors will gradually start getting into the cool range with different shades of blue that I plan for the rest of the clothes. It's fine if I go over the unpainted area, but I'm trying to be a bit more precise, just to save myself additional work of cleaning up the areas. So being very careful not to tint. So I'm using this slow, gentle movements of brush against the surface, making sure that the brush is loaded but not overloaded with contrast paint. Because if I overload it, it will just run without control, and you can literally press the paint from the excess of paint and steer it to where you want it. A bit too much here, so I can just clean it up. I've tinted part of the cloak, but that's fine. It will be darker anyway. Now I can go over it again once I have the whole part marked out, because then I can work over the same area to just keep the color getting gradually darker and darker and just solidify it. So there it is. It's like a kind of frame for the head. And now the shirt can be white. Why don't I just do it white? Like this off-white, and then or maybe, no, maybe not white. It will be still dark. I will keep it dark blue. So dark blue in the middle and brighter blue on the cloak, and the pants will be gray. And then the boots will be warm brown, just to have this kind of frame of heads and boots against the colder middle. And while it may seem like not much is happening at this point, in my mind, I'm just very actively visualizing how different colors interact with one another, how it affects the overall composition. So with this part of the process, and I have to admit I enjoy this part very much. So maybe before I move there, I will just pick up some of the individual strands of hair, starting with area which I touched with orange and I don't want it there. So just using the fine tip of the brush, picking up the individual strands of hair. Then I will do another highlight with slightly brighter shade. And this makes a world of difference between just the dry brushed and washed look that we had a moment ago. And when you pick up the strand of hair, again, it's important to take it slow. Don't force it, don't rush through it. Take your time to really focus on the strands of hair. Just moving back and forth. So slow, controlled movements. There's this little bun he has. And then if you feel like you've created too much contrast with picking up the strands of hair, there is always an option of giving it another glaze with heavily thinned down wash that won't spoil the work because the highlights will still be visible, but they will get toned down a little bit. And again, I'm pausing to just have a look at the model, make sure that I'm moving in the right direction with it. And the eyebrows. So rather than drawing a thin line along the whole surface, I'm just dotting it to reinforce this idea of bushy eyebrows. And I may do one quick highlight, because if you are being very selective and careful, then doing one more highlight here will be even less time consuming, because you don't do the whole surface. You can aim for where you think most of the light would be hitting it. So for this, in this case, I'm aiming for like the mid section of each hair strand. A bit highlight on the mustache. And also putting a bit of a highlight closer to the front of the hairline. This isn't a fast process, takes a while, but you should be able to see that the highlights are closer, then closer to the back it gets a bit darker. And again, I will pick up some details here. And then while I still have the wash on the palette, I will even thin it down more. And then add a quick glaze just to bring it all together. Yeah, so the face is pretty much done at this point. So it's time to start working on the clothes. And I will mix a color for that, because Thalassa blue is super intensive. It will bring up too much contrast. Maybe before I move there, I will just, the scarf or the shawl that he has, I'll just place a few highlights on it, just to go along the lines that are naturally formed there. Then a very light touch of even brighter white. And then I can put a glaze over that to bring it all together. So light, very light highlights, and then a quick wash of soft brown to bring it all together. So the purpose is again to keep this part of the model warmer shades versus the rest, which will be in cooler shades. There's still some detail to be picked up, like the metallics, the ornaments and the beard, but this will come at a later stage when I will be painting the buttons on the coat. And now maybe the blue part. So for the mix, I will use Thalassa blue, which is, as you can see when I just dab it on the white piece of paper, it becomes immediately visible. So it's a very, very strong color. I just want a little bit of it. I will put a bit more aromatic blue. And I will also be using aromatic blue for the coat. So just having an element that is involved in two different pieces of cloth. And to keep it somewhat connected to the warm colors I've used, I will add a drop of snakebite leather. Just a drop of it. And it becomes this kind of greenish, which I think would be fine for the coat, but I want it to be more strongly affected with blue. Yeah, that's more like the color that I'm after. So I'll grab a different brush. And now this model will become a much more 3D rounded miniature once I block the key colors, because what I'm going for is essentially blocking all the colors. So putting the base coat, just putting in the composition that I've described while working on the face. This can easily get darker if I go over it with another layer of the same wash. I may do it. So there is this blue sitting in the middle, and now I will use the same shade because I'm happy with it on the rest of the interior part of his clothing. Because Thalassa blue would be, it's a more of a sci-fi color, so I needed to somewhat adjust it. I think I would really recommend just being bold when you make your own mixtures of colors. Just thinking about the overall composition, the elements of contrast you want to create. Speaking of contrast, it's running dry, so I'll add a drop of Lamian medium. Mix it up a bit. And work on the back. Then it's a bit lighter shade, so I will go over it with another layer in a second. So while applying glazes or contrasts, you want to make sure that enough paint gets into the recesses, that they are clearly marked as darker areas, while still making sure that the elements, that the folds of the material don't absorb that much of the contrast. And while I don't expect anyone to be picking up at looking at miniature from below. I still don't want to leave any white showing, so the pants will be tackled later on, but for now just marking the whole blue area. And the pants will be darker, so even if I put some blue accidentally on them, it's not a problem, because it will be treated with a darker color in a second. So let's just pause for a second, and you should be able to see that the way contrast paints affect the surface is that they really nicely tint the color that the surface that you want to have modified, while the folds remain much brighter. So now I will take another small base and prepare a mix that I will use for the big cloak that he has. That one will need some more work, because it's, when I look at the artwork, it's a mixture of blue, gray, very dark in the recesses. So let's start with it. So I will use a mix of aromatic blue, and then there is this nice contrast color called, I think it's Space Wolf Gray. Let me just grab it. No, it's not Space Wolf, it's Griff Charger Gray. And I will begin with mixing these two. And I will use a slightly bigger brush. It's the Army Painter for base coating. So grabbing a few solid drops of aromatic blue and now a bit more of Glyph Charger Gray. Well, it's more of a bit, maybe not exactly 50-50 mixture. Still want more aromatic blue. And I will just test it next to what I have and see how it affects the model. Okay, it's pretty good. So I'm applying more on the miniature and then spreading it evenly. It's too bright at this stage, but it's fine. It can be modified, but what I care most about at this point is that it is a different color to what I have for the interior part. It looks really highly glossy now. It will lose the gloss as it dries, but it fills in the recesses nicely. Looks like this kind of old army uniform color. And I will also play with dry pigments on this miniature to make sure that that there is like visible wear and tear on them. and those kind of leather straps he has on his forearms. Just I'll be mindful that some of the sleeves, the cuffs of the sleeves are actually still visible from below them. So yeah, this is what I mean. And the same goes here. And here. And going below. Sorry guys, I need to hold it in at an awkward angle just to make sure I cover the whole surface, because otherwise I can miss a spot or two. And at this point I just go over the recesses, making sure the paint doesn't pull too much, because I wanted to pull, but I wanted to pull in a highly controlled manner. I'm getting somewhere with it. So while this layer dries, I will keep on pushing the darker blue. So prepare a bit more of a mixture that I had for the previous one. And a very light touch of snakebite leather. And a touch of lemon medium. And I can go with another round of no, that needs a bit more of Talasa blue. That's why I like to keep this piece of paper handy, just so that I can make sure that the mixture I make for strengthening the color is approximately the same color I've used already. That way I can ensure the coherence while I work on selected areas. Just keeping it a bit darker. Then thinking about the overall composition, I might use a bit of brown for just the shaded areas. And I've said it before, it's really important to turn the miniature around a few times to look at it from different angles, to one, make sure that you don't miss any spots, and two, just to make sure that you have control of the overall progress. Okay. So let me just quickly get a hairdryer just to speed up the drying process here a little bit. I will just make sure that I remove the pools, and I literally need just a few seconds to get to the bathroom and get the hairdryer. So be here in a second. You might hear some meowing. That's the cat who was sitting by the door and is absolutely disgusted with the fact that I locked him out. So he will probably be around. Okay. Now I can go ahead and reinforce the color of the cloak. Maybe grab a slightly larger brush, because it looks way too pale, too bright at this point. I want to give it more definition, so I'm using the mixture I've already used. And as you can see, it strengthens the color. It is clearly a different color than what I had for the darker blue section. And this gives me a bit more control, so I don't want to go at the surface with a very dark color from the get-go, because if I build it up this way, then with each successive wash of the mixture I have, I can decide which part I want to keep darker, where I want to have less of it, where I want to have more. So it's different than building up highlights from shades to brighter spots. It's a completely different approach. I've been approaching painting in this way for a while now. I think that the final effect is that the colors are a bit brighter than they would be if you started with black base coat. So for now, I'm just enjoying this approach, going from bright base coat rather than black one, which is what I used to do for the most part in the past. Not to mention that for me it works because it speeds up the painting process. And while it's not all about speed, well, at the end of the day, I want to have those miniatures painted, whether they are for my own collection and my own gaming or for someone else. And now I can see where I missed some spots of darker shade of blue. And I'm quite happy with how this light blue interacts with this orange scarf and the head. I will pause there for a second. There it is at this stage. Still the gloss is there, it will dry off in a second. Okay, it's in focus now. What I like about the contrast is that they really create this nice separation between recesses and the folds of the material. So time for another quick round with the hairdryer. Removing where I see that the paint is pulling a bit too much. A bit more of warm air. I think I will still add a bit more because there are areas which are still more white than blue, like the back here. I will darken it a little bit. This is a gradual process, and it allows me just to do it step by step. And now when the contrast paints dry, they get much thicker and they get more difficult. It gets much more difficult to work with them. So you want to be rather fast with them. Unless you put them on wet palette, which should give a bit more working time with them. And here I will just add a touch of slightly darker blue under the arm to just create a bit of a darker spot, and maybe from below here as well. Okay, so this is where we're at this point. Now I think it's time for the leather elements to be picked up, but in order to do it I will need to retouch the parts which were affected by blue. So for that I will get back to Wraithbone. And just clean it up. Looks like he's wearing two belts. Yeah, clearly those are two belts. I don't know how helpful that is, but I reckon he has so much clothing on him that he has separate belts for each piece of clothing. And the belts, they will be picked up with this very warm bread with Gorgranta fur. And again, this is something that will create some warm spots in the against the larger surface with colder shade. So this isn't a fast process. You want to make sure that the areas which are about to be covered with brown are clearly marked out. So the leather armor, well, he has armor 1 after all. Who cares, it's leather. Maybe he has like a plate of iron below the coat that he's wearing. It's a thick enough coat to put anything between them, between the coat and the body. Not to mention that Mikhail is a big guy. I think he's still size 2. Yeah, he's size 2. But just comparing him to other humanoid miniatures from Malifa, he towers over many of them. So putting him on this kind of tall base is one way of reinforcing that look. So again, cleaning up where the blue hit the base coated area. And in a second I will apply the warm brown. Let me just push the paint to the side. I'm very much committed to keep the workspace as non-cluttered as possible. That way the camera keeps the focus. Yeah, so now that's the color I was looking for, Cor Granta 4. And I will apply it on the armor, on those leather shoulder pads, and on those wraps around the forearms and belts. And that way we'll have most of the colors locked in. Then it's just a matter of highlighting them. So keeping it reasonably close and making sure that, again, that brush is loaded but not overloaded. Wiping off the excess of the paint if it's needed. Moving it upside down a little bit. The armor pads now. I think that Mikhail is this kind of model that can see a lot of play as an out of keyword choice, given how much damage he can sustain, and also being a really good protector Because another thing that I remember from his card is that if he's engaged with other models that are engaging both him and other models in your crew, in Mikhail's crew, so for example a master, then you're pretty much forced to target Mikhail. And he can soak up a lot of damage, he can get back to full health quickly. So it's such a wasted effort tackling him. And again, twisting the miniature around to get to tackle it from a few angles. And this allows me to also notice where there are spots that I missed when I had a go with blue. So the color composition is shaping out nicely. Now the second forearm. Also seems like there is a spot I need to retouch with blue here and there. Yeah, this approach allows me to fix any spots that I missed quite quickly and easily. And the belts. It's a bit awkward reaching some spots because once the miniature is assembled, it can get a bit challenging, but then I cannot really imagine painting it in sections because at the end of the day, you put a lot of effort into making sure that the gaps, that any potential gaps left after assembly are removed and that the connecting points are seamless. So while this might work for some other models which are like robots or space marines for that matter, which have different elements of armor, then it could be effective. For this one, I don't think so. Now the boots will be in a different shade because I have this warm leather brown on these sections, so I will choose a different shade of brown for the boots and for the rest. Just getting a bit more to create a few more darker spots. And the pants will be black to begin with. So I will use Black Templar. And again, I will pause for a second just to make sure everyone sees where I am with the model. Time for the trousers or pants, That's, I guess, depending whether you're from the UK or from the US. Okay, let me just check one thing. And Black Templar is a really nice color, but it the first layer that you apply doesn't really look black yet, more of a dark gray. So since it's about time to wrap things up, I think what I will do, I might do offline some more work of him offline. I'll see about that, or I will continue on the next stream. Maybe I will just put some black Templar on the pants and some snakebite leather on the shoes, and then I will, for on the next stream, work on this huge blade he has on the base and on all those fine details that are still left to be picked up. But thank you for following this stream. I will see you on the next one. Make sure you also follow other streams that are taking place later in the week. And for now, this is a wrap. Most of the stream was the face, but some pretty solid progress on the clothes overall. So thank you for sticking by, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, take care. Bye.